Hello, hello, everybody. Great to see you all. I see some familiar faces. Patrick, good to see you. Build rapport before business. That's great to see. Flavio, Paul, Mike, good to see you. Scott, Anita, Ian, nice to see you. See Van Caterham, Josip, fantastic. You're all joining. Great. So we are at the top of the hour. So let me kick off. Welcome everybody to this first session of our Mastermind that we launched this month. So welcome everybody. And today we're going to talk about human decision making. And I would like to start with addressing why this is such an important topic. This is the foundation, the fundament of everything we do. Because, like I say, if you don't know how people decide to become part of your plan, you probably will be part of their plan. There's a very interesting study done, actually, in the Netherlands, where I'm from. And it's about the train. And there are compartments in the train, probably like every country, where they request you to be silent. So people don't want you to talk there. So what they often do is they put signs like this on the outside of the compartment or on the inside. You see these icons, these stickers. But the problem was people kept on talking. So what they did, then they looked what we need to do. What were the normal ideas to overcome this problem? Let's put more stickers in the train. Let's do them on every chair. Still, it didn't have the desired effect. And then they asked somebody that had knowledge about behavioral science. How do people really make choices? What is the core of human decision making? And can you address this case from that point of view? And somebody came up with this idea. He designed the compartments where you had to be silent, like a library. And what's the association of being in a library? What people do when they are in a library? Then they are silent. So by having only this association, and as you can see, the icons, the stickers, they were all removed. So the initial prompt to be silent was even removed. Only the fact that the design, your surroundings were different. In this case, they designed the compartment like a library. It was sufficient to get the desired behavior to let people be silent. So therefore, human decision making and understanding it is crucial for your success. So let me first share some foundations. And I see some of our certified coaches as well in this meeting. And perhaps you have already heard these examples. Don't worry. Power of repetition and the reinforcement will be great. Second, by understanding this and bringing this to awareness to your clients, it will drive them as well in your direction. So the first thing I always address is I want to make 3 statements about human decision making and why the power of persuasion is why to have this skill is so important. And the first one is, at Roy, if you see somebody coming into the waiting room, you admit them. Please, thank you. So the first study done was a study done at the University of California. And they asked people, which message do you think would let you start conserving energy? Would that be message 1? It helps the environment. Would it be message 2? It's good for future generations. So it's good for your children, grandchildren. Would it be message 3? It saves money. Everybody loves to save some money, you would assume. Or Your neighbors are already conserving energy. So they asked, what do you think would be the most persuasive message for you to start conserving energy? Well, the far majority answered with the message of the environmental protection. And we all encountered this message, where when we go into a hotel, we are asked to reuse our towels to save the environment. You have to be aware that this message is not a guess from these big hotel groups. They hired professional agencies to do research and to come up with the most persuasive message. And that message was, reuse your towels to save the environment. But actually, the hotels saved a bit more than only the environment. They save laundry costs, they save cleaning costs. So if you imagine a big hotel group with a lot of hotels all over the world, this is millions of saving. So therefore, they hired these professional agencies to come up with the most persuasive message. And probably they spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with them. But in reality, what was the finding of this study? When they tested these people, what had the most impact, what message really had the biggest effect, was message 4. And as you are all studying Dr. Cialdini's work, you know the association of message 4 is social proof. So my claim here is, what is crucial to understand if you talk about human decision making, and we will dive deep into this, into this issue, is people typically don't know what influenced their behaviors and decisions. Why is this so important? Exactly the reason that I just gave. We often go out there. How do we solve this challenge? How do we solve this influence problem? Let's ask the people that we are talking to what we should do. Science actually tells us you probably don't get the right answers from those people because people typically don't know what influenced their behaviors. This is a great study that shows this. And of course, this is not the only study. We are all research-based, so we never make a claim based on a single study. There are multiple studies showing that people typically don't know what influenced their behaviors. So we need something else. We need an approach, a systematic approach, where we can rely on that we know how people make decisions, just like the trains in the Netherlands did. What you normally would get as an answer is, well, if you prompt me with those icons that I have to be silent, then probably I will be silent. Well, that didn't do the job. Something else did. The second thing, what is important to understand about human decision making, I go back to the 1930s, and I'd like to introduce you to this man. It's a French sociologist. His name was Lapierre. And Lapierre did a very interesting test. In the 1930s, unfortunately, there was even more racism than nowadays, and especially in the United States against Asian people. Asian people were perceived, they're only good enough to work. So they weren't welcome in bars, restaurants, hotels. And Lapierre wanted to visit the United States with 2 Chinese friends. So he was a smart man, and what he did, he wrote letters. Remember, now we are very used to communicate all over the world like we are doing now. Only in the 1930s, we didn't even have email. So he wrote letters, sent them to 251 hotels, bars, and restaurants. And his question was, dear hotel, restaurant, bar, I like to visit your establishment with my 2 Chinese friends. Am I welcome? And out of that 251 establishments, 128 actually wrote a letter back to Lapierre. And the answer was, for him, not that surprising, unfortunately. 92% claimed we will reject the Chinese friends. In other words, they said, well, Mr. Lapierre, you're from France, you're welcome, but your Chinese friends are not welcome with us. That was not actually what happened. Lapierre already visited all those 251 establishments with his 2 Chinese friends. His research was what people actually did. And in reality, he was only rejected once. So 92% said, you are not welcome. But at the moment that people had to make the decision, when Lapierre was actually there with his Chinese friends, only one establishment rejected the couple. Or in other words, what is important about human decision-making and to understand at a deep level is we don't always act in line with our values. And what I want to say here, people can say a lot. I will always do this. Like they say, I would definitely reject the couple. But in reality, they didn't. And recently I got a great question. They say, but Buzz, if you look at the principle of consistency and commitment, how does that work? Because if people make a commitment to something, they would do it, right? That's the whole principle. And that's correct. But how do values, how people often say they have certain values, it's formed in a different way. There's often a lot of peer pressure, social peer pressure in that moment, why people just go with the flow. That's what our principle of social proof says. So they say a lot of things because of that peer pressure. In the moment of decision making, when the peer pressure is taken away, suddenly it aren't their values. Because they didn't make an active or public commitment, what is how we say you need to activate the principle of commitment, and then the values are gone. The biggest and important lesson for this mastermind is this. You cannot rely if people say, I always do this, I always will do that, that's the single truth. Research shows a lot of times that people don't always act that way. So that leads us to another thing. The first lesson was, if we want to solve a challenge, we ask those people, we might not get the right answers because they don't know what influenced their behaviors and decision. The second is, we cannot always rely on if people are standing there and saying, well, I definitely will do that. Again, this leads to, but how do we need to move people in our direction? And I will come there in a second, of course. First, I like to make the third statement, and then I go back to a more recent one at Houston Airport. And what happened there, and this is why I love this case, is because this is how it always happens in organizations. Houston Airport had a problem. And their problem was they got complaints. And no organization likes complaints. The complaint was, it takes way too long before the luggage is at the luggage belt. So they took it very seriously. And I don't know if anybody ever been at Houston Airport. I've been there twice, and it's a huge, huge airport. So compare it with JFK in New York, or with Heathrow in London. And then what every company normally does, you get a lot of complaints, you dive into the process of something. How can we optimize the process? Because that will solve our complaints. And that's exactly what Houston Airport did. So they hired, again, for a lot of money, experts. And those experts did a fantastic job. They achieved this. Within 8 minutes, the luggage was on the luggage belt. So the plane was at the gate, and within 8 minutes, the luggage was at the luggage belt. A fantastic achievement, because that's much quicker than Heathrow or JFK. So Houston Airport thought, well, we did an amazing job. There won't be any complaints anymore. that was not the case. The complaints kept on coming. So then they looked into another direction to find a solution. They looked into the direction of behavioral science. So again, they hired somebody who had knowledge about human behavior, about human decision-making. And that person came with the final solution that really helped. I just let you think. Some of you know this answer. But what was the final solution? It was, well, park the plane further away from the gates. Just let people complaining. Or put some extra entertainment at the luggage belt. Well, if I ask this question to the public, everybody always says answer 1 or answer 3. Luckily, nobody says answer 2, because that would be a mistake by definition. You never want to let your clients complain, of course. The right answer here was, let's park the plane further away from the gates. What was the actual case here? These were domestic flights, so no passport checks, no customs. So the domestic flight arrived, and the 8 minutes were 1 minute walk, 7 minutes wait. When they parked the plane further away, it became a 7-minute walk and a 1 minute wait. And there were no more complaints. So the clients were happy, and Houston Airport was happy. Now again, what did this cost? Almost nothing. When the plane arrived, they just guided him to another parking spot, so to say. That was the only thing they did. So often, if you understand human decision-making at a higher level, you can not only move more people in your direction, you also will be able to do so with much less investment. Lesser time, less money, less energy to reach your goals, and to reach your goals even more often. That's why this is such a crucial element of what we do, the science of influence. To do that in the most powerful way, you first have to understand how people really make choices. And my statement here, people don't know what they want. And Henry Ford had a famous saying. He said, if I had to create what people wanted, I had to breed a faster horse instead of inventing the car. Nobody knew at that time they wanted the car. They knew it when they saw it. Same with Instagram. Instagram previously had a slightly different app, and nobody wanted it. But suddenly, when Instagram was there, everybody wanted it. But people also typically don't know what they want. Now, if we know this, we see that as human beings, we are interesting creatures if it comes to decision making. We cannot really predict our own behavior. We cannot give others the information they need to let us move in their direction. Luckily for us, there's almost 100 years of scientific research telling us how people make decisions and how we can get more yeses out of these people. And to do so, we need to go to the foundations of human decision making. And at this picture, we see 2 people. And I like to, both are connected actually with Dr. Cialdini. And the first one, one of them we probably all know, that's Barack Obama. And the other one, I think some of you might know him by now. Patrick, can you give us the answer?
That's Daniel Kahneman, Bas.
Yes, exactly. That's Dr. Daniel Kahneman. And Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize in 2002. And before I dive deeper in Daniel Kahneman, what was the connection of Dr. Cialdini with Barack Obama? And this is not widely known, but it's a very powerful. Dr. Cialdini was actually with Daniel Kahneman in the team that drove Barack Obama's election campaigns in 2008 and 2012. And especially in Europe, we see Barack Obama now as this charismatic, great president that the United States had. Of course, in politics, opinions are divided, but that's how he is perceived. But in 2008, he was a pretty unknown senator that suddenly ran for president. And Barack Obama was a smart man. He knew the average playbooks that people have to get into the White House probably wouldn't work for him, because those figures that often run for president are public figures that were in the spotlight for many years at high positions. Of course, senator is a high position, but he was a quite unknown senator. And he wasn't the charismatic speaker we know him nowadays. If you look old interviews from Barack Obama, it's a totally different person almost. So this wasn't an easy job, and Barack Obama realized that. So instead of relying on the standard playbooks that these campaign managers had, he said, I will rely on behavior science. Well, we all know in the end that was quite a successful choice for Barack Obama. So he won the elections, and Dr. Cialdini was in the team that led his campaigns. So that's the first connection that Dr. Cialdini has to these guys in the picture. The second one is indeed Dr. Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman, what I'm now going to explain, this is the most fundamental explanation why the principles of persuasion from Dr. Cialdini are so powerful. And Dr. Kahneman won a Nobel Prize in 2002. And he's a behavioral scientist, so you would expect, well, he won the Nobel Prize for psychology. That was not the case, because he won the Nobel Prize for psychology doesn't exist, so he couldn't won it. He won the Nobel Prize for economics, and that's an interesting fact by itself, because why does a behavioral scientist win a Nobel Prize for economics? Because, of course, the impact that human decision-making has on the economy is huge. It's how people spend their money as well. How people make choices has a huge impact on the economy. So what was such an important finding from Daniel Kahneman, which he wrote in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow? He said, in our brain are actually two brains when it comes to human decision-making. And luckily for me and all of us, he gave them very easy names, so I can remember them, and now I can speak about them. It's System 1 and System 2. We can all remember this. So System 1 is like a fast, unconscious brain. And it works on automatic shortcuts. So it works on shortcuts. They are pre-programmed, deeply rooted in our way of decision making. For example, if something is more expensive, it's probably better. If somebody in a hospital wears a white coat, he's probably a medical expert, and I can ask him questions about my health and I get a correct answer. These kind of shortcuts. But it's built for everyday decisions. For example, if somebody approaches you in the supermarket, you don't make any difficult calculation. What's the airstream? What's the best angle to pass? You just pass that person. System 1 takes care of that. So we need System 1 really hard, because research is divided, but they say we make approximately 15,000 to 35,000 decisions per day. And this includes the simple decisions on which chair you sat this morning. Where did you put your coat? These are also decisions, simple decisions where you don't really think about when you're doing it. System 1 is taking care of that for us. So it's an unconscious process. But it's error prone. It's not always the case that these shortcuts are right. It's not always that when something is more expensive, it's better. It's not always the case that when everybody is doing something, it's the best thing to follow. But most of the time it is. So it's error prone, but most of the time these shortcuts guide us into the right direction. Then we have system 2. And I compare it with a slow computer. It's a slow process. It's a conscious, rational part of the brain. If you look at the brain, let's say system 1 is our inner core, and system 2 is the outside part of our brain, which makes us humans and makes us the most powerful creature on planet Earth nowadays, because we have the capacity to use system 2. There's one problem. System 2 is effortful, and human beings don't like to put a lot of effort in their decision making. But it's also built for complex decisions. And system 2 can compare all the options that are on the table and then say, well, this is the best option for me, and therefore I select this option, and therefore system 2 is reliable. And now, old economics always claimed that the human being is a rational creature, right? 2002, Daniel Kahneman proved them. It's a rational creature, and therefore, when it comes to an important decision, we would use system 2. Daniel Kahneman proved them wrong. 2002, approximately 90% of all our decisions, including the very important ones, are made with system 1. Nowadays, research already shows us that's up to 95%. There's even research that says, but it's not significant enough yet, that it's 98. In a moment, I will explain why this rapid increasing trend is going on. 95% is made based on these shortcuts, even the most important decisions. I always give the example of buying a house. Buying a house is one of the biggest decisions a human being makes. What do? We start very rational. We go on the internet, make a search. Where do we want to live? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Do I want a garden? Do I want an apartment? And then we filter. Then it comes. We're going to view these houses. And then you hear these cliches. Well, it was actually too expensive, but I totally fell in love with the house. I just had to buy it. That's not a rational decision. System 1 finally made a decision based on totally different shortcuts to buy that house. It were not the facts that drove us into that decision. So a starting point here is, like Daniel Kahneman says, system 1 runs the show. That's the one you want to move. Now I like to make some extra deep dive drawings here about system 1 and 2, because the importance of understanding this is the importance of understanding why these principles are so powerful. So we have system 1 and system 2. Fast, shortcut based, error prone. This is rational brain. It's for complex decisions, and it's reliable. Now, if we look at it, we already know the far majority of decisions is here. Let's say 95% so far. In a moment, I will explain why is there an increasing trend. But there's more to know. Actually, system 1, here I need to write slow. As it says, system 1 is fast. The other one is slow. There is research that shows that actually system 1 makes all the decisions first. It's like 0.3 seconds faster, microseconds faster than system 2. The system 1 is like making all the decisions because we get all this information overload. So system 2, you could also say, is more like a handbrake. And I always like to give this example. It's, let's imagine I walk outside and I see a beautiful Lamborghini car. And then system 1 thinks, well, boss, that's a great car for you. And he wants to buy it. System 2 is in this metaphor, literally the handbrake, and says, well, boss, let's not buy this Lamborghini. That's not the best decision for your bank account. And so far, I never bought that Lamborghini. What is the most important lesson here is that system 1, let's say, never grows up, never becomes smarter. Because what would I have done if I would bought that Lamborghini? I know it wasn't the best decision at that moment. But would I tell myself, boss, that was such a dumb decision. You are really stupid that you bought this expensive car. I probably wouldn't do that. What I would do is, well, you work so hard and you like that car so much and you deserve it. You start telling yourself stories like that. So system 2 never tells system 1 that it did something wrong. We call that confirmation bias. So we confirm to ourselves, even if we did something that wasn't the smartest move, that it still was okay to do it. That means that we can rely on that system 1 will always be guided by the same shortcuts. That system won't change. So that's the first important lesson here. The second one is we are sitting here in this mastermind together because we want to be more persuasive. And if you want to be more persuasive, you want to use your full brain power to come up with the best ideas to do so. Now we have a problem because system 2, which we will use if we are thinking on campaigns, intend to generate ideas, or ideas that you generate, to trigger system 2 in the other person's mind. And that's a mistake, because we all know by now, system 1 runs the show, that's the one you want to move. So based on all these lessons so far about human decision making and knowing system 1 and system 2, we need to be able to use our full brain power, but through a systematic way of thinking, a systematic process. We need to be able to come up with ideas that will trigger system 1 in the other person's mind. And that's a very powerful thing. If you have a process where you can use your full brain power, but you use it in a way, a systematic way, that you can look at a case through this systematic way of thinking, which we teach in our practitioner program, and we also will address here in one of the mastermind sessions. From a signal, you select the right principle. Through this principle, you go to a set of ideas based on the activators and amplifiers of those principles. Now you can use your full brain power, but the set of ideas that you will generate, they do the job, because those ideas will trigger these shortcuts, and these shortcuts are decision triggers to let people say yes to you. Of course, I will answer questions. So I see people writing, great. So if you make notes, fantastic. If you have any questions, I will answer them, of course, as well in this session. So let me get back to here. So the work of Daniel Kahneman is actually a crucial foundation for us to realize, first of all, why are these principles so powerful? Second of all, it brings to awareness that we can rely on science to drive people in our direction, because science knows these shortcuts. And third, it tells us we need to have a systematic way to get more yeses, because if I design a campaign without a systematic way, I probably want to persuade people with very rational and factual arguments. That's how the far majority of people tries to persuade another human being. Or factual arguments will trigger system 2. And that's not the one that runs the show. This is the core reason why we need to understand the principles of persuasion. And as I promised, why this increasing trend? Why in 2002, 90%, already 95%, and already research see we are increasing again. So we rely heavily on system 1. Then I introduce you another Nobel Prize winner, actually the first behavioral scientist that started to look at behavioral science and connected it with economics. It's Herbert Simon. He won a Nobel Prize in 1978, and they even say he paved the way for Daniel Kahneman to win his Nobel Prize. And Herbert Simon sometimes was even perceived as a bit crazy because he was way ahead of his time. In the 70s, he was already talking about AI, which today for us is true reality. But imagine how people perceived that 55 years ago. They go, what is he talking about? But he was a visionary. In his thesis that won the Nobel Prize, he introduced a term, and the term was satisficing. And that's also very important to realize. He said, information overload leads to satisficing. Let me ask you a question to think about. In what world do we live in? Do we have more or less information to process than in the 1980s? Well, I can hear you say much more information, more or less than 20 years ago, much more or less than 10 years ago, more. We have all these apps on our phones, we have floated email boxes, we continuously are bombarded with information that we need to process. And that leads up to satisficing. What is satisficing? We don't look for the best option anymore. We look for the first sufficiently satisfactory solution. If you now compare this to system 1 and system 2, what's the lesson here? System 2 is designed in our brain to choose the best option. If we have satisficing, we stop doing that. So that's one of the reasons why I say we lean more and more on system 1. Because of all the information overload, our slow computer just cannot process all that information good enough so to pick the best option every time. We go into a mode of satisficing and we ask ourselves a question, not anymore, is this the best option for me? Is this sufficiently good enough? And again, what are the decision triggers? To answer that question, not the facts. The facts will trigger system 1. These shortcuts that are pre-programmed in every human being, in every culture, in every language, they will answer that question for us. If it's sufficiently good enough, yes, because the expert says so. Yes, because it's scarce in availability. Yes, because everybody is doing so. That's how we answer the question. Not yes, because this new car has a motor engine of 3.6 liters and 22-inch wheels, which I really love. That are not the final decision triggers. The other things will do the job. So that's one reason why we rely more heavily on system 1, the information overload. The funny thing, we always think nowadays, oh, we are much smarter than people 100 or 150 years ago. Yes, we are able to do great things with technology that they weren't able to do. But if it comes to decision making, those people had more time to make the best decision than we nowadays have. They use system 2 to make the best option more often than we do. Why? Information overload leads to satisficing. And a funny example of satisficing is this research done in the US, and people after a hard day of work, you realize, I need some groceries for evening dinner. How do you walk into the supermarket with all your brain power on and let's look for the best special offer today? Probably not. You just go in, you see some things, take it, and you want to go. And a lot of people go in that mode because of a lot of information overload. Their mind is completely somewhere else with that state of mind in a supermarket. Therefore, they did this experiment. They had these small stickers, about this size, with everyday low price. And in the morning, the managers of these supermarkets just randomly put those stickers to certain products. The next day, or in the evening, they take them away, and the next day, they assign those stickers, totally random, to different products again. They did that for 3 weeks, and then they looked, if a product had such a sticker, what is the increase in the amount of sales? And it was astonishing 100%. The sales doubled if the product had a sticker everyday low price. Even the sticker itself doesn't say anything. It doesn't say special offer. It's just confirming, well, every day this product has a low price. 100% increase. Why? We are guided by system 1 who is perceiving these things. Okay, apparently, is this sufficiently good enough? Yes, because this product every day has a low price. If you rationally analyze this, it's almost insane that we do these things. But this is the core of our human decision making. We perceive ourselves, and nobody likes to look in the mirror or self-reflect and think, well, am I really doing that? We like to look at ourselves as super rational. And maybe the other people on planet Earth, well, they do this behavior, boss. I know me, I always make the best decisions. And that also makes it very hard for us to accept that we all are this. We've unconsciously push against this, that we are this, but we are this. And again, this is a hardcore reason. Trust on the science, because there's so much of scientific research on this. Then the point is, last one, why is system 1 increasing? I go back to Canadian research done in 2005 with brain scanning devices. And you see here in an iconized form 2 creatures that live on planet Earth. One is the human being, and one is a goldfish. And if I tell a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds, and a human being has had an attention span of about 20 minutes in the 1980s, how many minutes do you think the attention span of a human being was in 2005? Yeah, I see some people moving that way. Yes, definitely low. Sometimes I hear 5 minutes, 2 minutes, sometimes 2 minutes. It's 8 seconds. We were beaten by the goldfish. This became actually a bit controversial research because the thesis was written in a way that human beings cannot have their attention to something longer than 8 seconds. That's of course not the case. We can watch a movie for 1.5 hours, and we can, or a Netflix series. But luckily, Microsoft repeated this research in 2010. From 2005 to 2010, Microsoft found attention span dropped from 8 to 7 seconds. And what it is, it's how quickly we are distracted. And I always like to give this example is, you take out your phone because you want to call somebody. You open your screen and you see you have text messages, Facebook messages, Instagram notifications. Bang, within 1 second, we are distracted because what we do, we are not going to call that person. We open those messages. In 1 second, we are gone. Then after we answered all those messages, then sometimes people are with their phone in their hand and thinking, what was I going to do? Why is this so important relating to our increasing reliance on system 1? System 2, as I said, it cost us effort. To do something that costs effort, you need to keep your attention in that area. We are so quickly distracted that it becomes more and more difficult to use system 2. And therefore, we rely as well on system 1. So this is also to do with that satisfying information overload. That's why our attention span is also dropping, but it comes from another angle, and therefore we rely more heavily. Then system 1 is always often compared to our croc brain, reptile brain, croc brain. Especially in online communication, I like to compare, I think it's a wrong comparison. I like to compare system 1 to a child of 7 instead of to a crocodile for 2 reasons. One, system 1 is definitely smarter than the average crocodile. System 1 knows 2 plus 2 is 4. System 1 can drive a car at an empty road. Did you never had that you drove a car, you come at your destination and think, how did I get here? Well, probably system 1 was driving. So system 1 is smarter. More important, and especially in an online world, is if you think how to communicate to somebody, it's easier to think how to communicate to a child of 7 than how to communicate to a crocodile. So to do a few simple tests, these are real cases where I was involved. And please write your answers in the chat. Open it here. Which email do you think was opened more? Knowing we need to trigger system 1. Is that answer A or B? $100 straight into your bank account? Or I see already an A in the chat. Some A's. The best students ever here. I see all A's. Thank you for your participation. And that's the right answer because it's simpler language, so easier to process. I never heard a parent say to their child, well, let's go to the shop because we can have this cashback promotion. No child would know what that is. Then this one is also interesting. Which ad got more clicks? This is a campaign, as you can see, which you did in China. And the difference is the picture of the woman. Do you think ad A or B? I see B is A, the majority is B. And B is indeed the correct answer. Why? Emotions. System 1 is also drawn to strong emotions. If you have, imagine on a birthday, and the adults are laughing real loud, and there's a little child, probably it starts laughing as well. It has no clue why it's laughing, but it's attracted to that emotion. So a first thing, some tips that I want to share. If you want to talk to system 1, use simple language. Use as little words as possible. Again, definitely in the online world. Make it visual because we can process visuals much quicker than words. And make it emotional because we are drawn to emotions. Then the last promise I made to all of you. I told both people had a connection with Dr. Cialdini at this picture. And what is the connection that Daniel Kahneman had with Dr. Cialdini? Is, of course, Daniel Kahneman had a lot of questions. Well, respect, here's your Nobel Prize, great job, fantastic work, but tell us, now we know we need to move system 1. How on earth do we do that? And there's a story which literally happened. Dr. Cialdini, Dr. Kahneman were in the same room with a lot of grad students. And Dr. Cialdini came to the students where Daniel Kahneman was talking. And Dr. Cialdini made a light joke. And he says, oh, there is the man. And then Daniel Kahneman stood up and looked at the students. He says, no, Dr. Cialdini is the man. So Daniel Kahneman always said, if you want to move system one, you need to see the principles that Dr. Cialdini defined, the universal principles of influence, as the triggers that will trigger system one, so more people will move in your direction. And just the principles are, for some of you who first joined this mastermind, reciprocity, liking, unity, social proof, authority, consistency, and scarcity. As I see familiar faces that also are in a practitioner or certified coach program, you will be trained in that program for that systematic approach. What we are going to do now, everybody has the foundation and the right way of thinking about human decision making. In this mastermind, we will dive deep into every principle in all little nuances with examples that are not in the practitioner program. You will work on your cases, your challenges for you, for your clients, applying these principles. And therefore, in my mind, this was a crucial, not to be missed session to understand why it's so powerful, why we need a systematic approach to use our full brain power to come through these principles to a set of ideas that will move system one, and therefore we will hear more yeses. In other words, from now on, if we want to hear yes, we start to see these principles as the decision triggers in the people we want to move in our direction. One short chapter, it's connected to ethics. Everything we do is connected to ethics. Then I will take some questions as well. I want to make an important claim because this affects human decision making. Persuasion is not misleading. You can mislead people once, but there's also something to do with human decision making. If you mislead one person once, they will make totally different decisions to you or in association with you if you mislead them. So also in our training, we give you 3 things to think about. We always say, and I will add in this session 3 more things in the online environment. First one, are you truthful? Do you tell the truth? Would I tell this to my father, mother, brother, or sister, this information? These are the minimum criteria, by the way. Am I presenting my request sincerely? Or in other words, there's a story about a supermarket who says, we have a special deal with our waters. It's normally 69 cents. They had a for sale sign and the new price was 69 cents. More people bought the water because like the 6 stickers, everyday low price. But at one moment, people perceive that message and understand they are being fooled. So it will backfire enormously. This is what we mean. Do I present my request sincerely, my data sincerely? And maybe the most important question of all is it wise to make this request? If a person would say yes to me today, would they say yes to my next request? And if one of these 3 questions is answered with no, I and everybody in the Cialdini Institute would advise you, don't make that request. You may get your yes today, but it will probably backfire and you won't get any more yeses. And that person will probably tell a lot of people, don't do business with that individual. But in the online world, we have other ways of unethical designs, how I call them. So one question you also should ask, am I not using a shape or pattern in a different way than intended? For example, this you see a lot on websites. They design like an email box or a message icon that appears you have a message. Yes, more people click on it because this badge app icon, it's a very powerful prompt. But it's unethical. It's clickbait. Don't do that. 2, and I'm not deliberately creating confusion. For example, check this box if you don't want to receive our newsletter. You check a box if you want something, not if you don't want something. Still, I see a lot of also big companies that use these techniques. There's more and more legislation now coming up to avoid this kind of behavior. So you maybe win once, but you not win on the long run if you use these kind of designs. And my third one is, am I not hiding something important? For example, people do with very small fonts. If you click continue, suddenly in this example, this will become your starting page. People don't want that, so don't hide information on purpose. So ethical persuasion and human decision making. So they make decisions in the long run and in the short, so you have success in the short term and long term on human decision making. Tell the truth, be sincere, offering real value, and present your design without creating confusions and hiding important aspects. I want to thank you for your attention in this mastermind session about human decision making. Does anybody has a question how that works? In the menu, there's a button reactions, and there you can raise your hand and I will take your question. You can unmute yourself if there are any questions or comments. Yes, Flavio, good to see you.
Ciao, Bas. I like very much the presentation and the focus on how we influence the decision of the people. There is one step before that is mainly for marketeers and salespeople, that is about influencing the decision to engage with us.
Yep.
And this I find extremely difficult, sincerely speaking, especially in these days, because we are bombarded by information, and it's very difficult to understand what capture the attention, what make the people decide to talk with you. Give your attention more than decide on the proposals that will follow. I will sell you a turbine, I sell you a bulb, I sell you a book or whatever. The first one is this, and so I wonder if you have any hint, especially because of your experience with online, that can help,
Yes, and it's a great question, and it's definitely true, and it's also very connected to what I just explained. To get engagement, we need their attention, first of all, for example. So when people are quickly distracted, it's a more complicated, it became a more complicated area, of course, than 20, 30 years ago. What can I best advise in this session, Flavio, is can you form what is the behavior that you want to achieve? What do you call engagement? Because I worked in a lot of consulting areas where a lot of companies ask me the same question. I want to increase my engagement. And I say, that's something, as you say, I want more sales. But sales is not a behavior that I can influence. Engagement is not the behavior that I can influence. So what I like to do, and I'm not a guy, as you know, I want to answer questions with questions, but what I would recommend is if you can get a measurable behavior. Engagement is opt-in for a newsletter. Engagement is the open rate of the email. Engagement is the click-through rate after an email. Engagement is the reply rate on my LinkedIn messages. If we can start defining that, that's the first step. Then, because engagement contains of a lot of different areas, I just now named 4. And then per type of engagement, we need to have an influence case. And per influence case, we can see which kind of principles would suit that case the best. So that would be my approach. And I'm happy that during these mastermind sessions, and as you are being a Cialdini certified coach, to continue this conversation. So if I can ask you for the next session, prepare one of those cases, because I think everybody is very interested in this topic. And we're just going to do live some not brains, group intelligence settings, and that's what we always also will have in this mastermind collaboration sessions to find the best solutions. Would that make sense, Flavio?
Yeah, I think you gave a good hint. I remember reading your book and getting this approach of breaking down into the engagement into something more, let's say, solid or an action, a real action to focus
Exactly.
on.
We'll define the behavior. That's the thing I always advise. We cannot influence the outcome. We can influence the behavior that leads to the outcome. Yeah. And therefore, the more specific we can be about what we want to achieve, and then we achieve it. Like I said, I did this multiple times within small and large organizations, and everybody nowadays wants the attention from their clients, and often it's called engagement. Only you can define multiple ways of engagement, and that is different per company, per person, what is really your goal. So once we define that, we can move forward and have this journey here together. And start with one. That's also my advice.
I have for sure a few cases that can be interesting. I will send to you a few notes. And
I love that. Yeah, fantastic. And I will integrate that into these sessions because I think this is a challenge that people will love to get become more influential on this challenge nowadays.
Yeah.
Yes. One more question, thanks. Johannes. You're on mute.
Hey, Bas. How you doing?
Hello. Good to
see you. I loved it. It was great. Very, very great input. I really loved it. I wanted to give my quick input on the question that Flavio had, if I'm allowed to. So, because that's my business, right? I need to get attention from people, right? So, and like that's why I'd say what from my experience works very well is really hyper personalization today. So really go on their name and go on something that they have done, like a post that they have written or something like that. This really draws attention. Like if you're in a mailbox, for example, and you read, "Hi, Bas, I've seen this post from you where you wrote about this and this and that," you have Bas' attention. You know what I mean? So that's something that really works very well in today's time is hyper-personalization and calling out their name or calling out. Then you can again work with social proof. Hey, we have done this for your competitor. Again, that's something that is interesting. So you can use the principles as well, obviously, to get the attention. But what is super important because people really care about themselves. So if you put something out about themselves, you got their attention. That's just what I wanted to bring in.
I like this example. Thanks for sharing, Johannes. Great job. Thanks a lot. Shrikant.
Yeah, boss, I have a typical example, right? I work in a technology setup, right? When we make software, right? And then, so there are a lot of managers, those who are very timid and would not actually do the thing in the right time or the right way, and would not agree to certain suggestions which are the right suggestions, and they get stuck and the whole thing gets delayed because of that. How do we influence something like that?
Fantastic question. And again, these principles work fantastic for it. So a quick one what is an experience with managers, I always reflect to the principle of consistency, because managers and people high up in organizations normally intend to believe themselves. They built their career by making certain decisions and they came higher up. And the more higher up they came, the more they start thinking, I make the best decisions. So one tip I can get is look where they made a certain decision, connecting with the decision you want them to make today. Of course, all the principles work, but that's the first advice that comes to mind, which often people, let's call it higher up in the organizational hierarchy, are quickly affected by. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yes, it does. It does.
Fantastic. Well, then I hope everybody here got a great first session of this mastermind where we lay the foundation to understand the science of human decision making. And from here, we take it on for the rest of the journey, where we will work together, like I said, or we will dive deep into these principles, and we will work on cases all the time. So I loved also the first questions. So we want to have these answers to these. You will get these answers to these challenges. Thanks all for joining. Great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all. Bye-bye.